In a historic turn, Mali has shaken up the global and African landscape by announcing the repayment of $332 million in foreign and domestic debt, becoming the first African nation to fully free itself from these financial obligations. This achievement has shocked corrupt leaders across Africa, as Captain Assimi Goita's government boldly steps forward to claim Mali's economic sovereignty. This move sparks a multitude of questions. How has Assimi Goita managed this economic feat in such a short time? What strategic measures were undertaken, and what message does this send to other African leaders who may have ties to foreign influences? Today, we'll break down this groundbreaking story, looking at the pivotal steps Mali has taken and the potential for an economic revolution across Africa. For decades, Mali, like many African nations, has been burdened by overwhelming debt, both a legacy of colonialism and decades of dependency on foreign loans. This debt has impacted Mali's schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, stifling progress and leaving the country in a cycle of dependency. But Mali's recent debt repayment not only changes this narrative, but also represents a powerful statement of self-determination. By eliminating foreign and domestic debt, Mali, under Assimi Goita, is asserting its control over its own destiny. In recent years, Mali, alongside its neighbors Burkina Faso and Niger, has taken a strong stance against external interference. These countries faced crippling sanctions from ECOWAS, leading to debt defaults that could have brought them to their knees. Yet, rather than submitting to international pressure, Assimi Goita's government in Mali made bold economic choices that ultimately freed the nation from the shackles of debt. This success story could be a beacon for other African countries seeking to break free from the grip of unsustainable foreign debt. Sub-Saharan Africa currently holds more than $700 billion in external debt. These obligations drain resources that could otherwise be invested in critical sectors like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Every year, billions flow out of Africa in debt repayments, which perpetuates the cycle of dependency. Mali's decisive debt repayment, however, shows a new path forward, one that questions the influence of neo-colonial financial dynamics and prioritizes true African sovereignty. This isn't just about Mali. It's a signal to all African nations that a new era of financial autonomy may be within reach. Mali's debt-clearing initiative is part of a larger movement among Sahel nations to reclaim economic independence. This movement has inspired the formation of the Sahel Alliance, a coalition between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. This alliance, a first of its kind, seeks to challenge the influence of former colonial powers and set a new framework for partnerships. These nations aim to redefine their relationships with foreign financial institutions and pursue their own models of regional security and economic growth. Leaders like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré have implemented policies that focus on financial autonomy, such as creating national banks and issuing bonds to attract direct investment. But Mali's bold step has also spurred a significant shift in international relations. For decades, France has maintained both military and economic influence in the Sahel, often justified by a commitment to combat extremism and promote stability. However, the Sahel Alliance nations are signaling a desire to end this arrangement, asserting that traditional aid structures often benefit foreign nations more than the African countries themselves. As Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger seek alternative alliances, countries like Russia and China have emerged as potential partners, willing to invest without the political stipulations often attached by Western institutions. This move raises critical questions. Could partnerships with Russia or China lead to a different type of dependency, or could they truly support these countries' long-term autonomy? The Sahel Alliance nations are carefully weighing these choices, aiming to avoid simply replacing one form of influence with another. They envision a future where African countries control their own resources and have the power to reinvest profits domestically. Assimi Goita's government has also placed a strong emphasis on resource nationalism and economic diversification as part of its broader strategy. Countries within the Sahel Alliance are rich in valuable resources like gold and uranium, and they aim to increase control over these assets to retain more wealth within their borders. Resource control is just one piece of the puzzle, however. Mali and its allies are working on long-term strategies to develop industries beyond raw material extraction. By investing in agriculture, manufacturing, and technology, Mali and its neighbors are building diversified economies that are less vulnerable to fluctuations in global markets. France and the West have long maintained a grip on Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, exploiting their economies through a combination of debt, foreign aid, and the controversial CFA franc currency system. For decades, these financial mechanisms have kept these countries in cycles of dependency and hindered their ability to fully exercise economic sovereignty. As Mali's recent debt payoff illustrates, however, leaders like Assimi Goita are now challenging this legacy and seeking to create a more autonomous future for their nations and the Sahel region at large. The CFA franc, used by 14 African countries including Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, was introduced in 1945 under French colonial rule and has remained a contentious symbol of neocolonialism. The currency is pegged to the euro, and around 50% of the foreign exchange reserves of CFA nations are held in the French treasury, giving France an outsized role in their economic affairs. This arrangement is seen by many as a direct way for France to control the economic policies of these countries, effectively limiting their ability to make independent financial decisions. By controlling the currency, France has the power to influence inflation rates, interest rates, and overall economic stability in the region. This dependency often forces these nations to prioritize French interests, limiting their ability to manage resources effectively or pursue local development without outside interference. Debt and foreign aid have also been powerful tools in this relationship. Over the years, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have received billions in loans and aid packages from France, the European Union, and institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. These funds come with significant conditions attached, often requiring the countries to adopt economic policies that prioritize foreign investors and multinational corporations. While presented as support for development, these conditions typically focus on privatizing public services, allowing the entry of foreign businesses into strategic sectors, and limiting local control over resources. Consequently, instead of boosting local economies, the benefits often flow back to foreign companies, reinforcing a cycle of economic dependency. Debt has further entrenched this dynamic. The high-interest loans provided by Western nations and international institutions have kept these countries trapped in repayment cycles, diverting funds that could be used for essential services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. External debt has been used as a lever to impose austerity measures, effectively reducing the funds available for social development and making these nations more reliant on Western financial support. The burden of debt has also restricted these countries' abilities to reinvest in their own economies, often keeping them from achieving meaningful economic growth. Mali's recent payoff of $332 million in debt is a rare success story, but the need for similar freedom remains across the Sahel and beyond. Foreign aid, while publicly positioned as assistance, also plays a role in sustaining dependency. Much of the aid provided by Western powers has been tied to political and economic requirements that align with the interests of donor countries. This aid, channeled through various agencies and NGOs, often dictates the sectors that receive funding, limiting the recipient country's ability to make autonomous decisions based on their own development priorities. Instead of empowering these nations to build self-sustaining economies, the aid framework perpetuates a system where France and the West wield significant influence over their internal affairs. For Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the recent trend toward regional alliances and economic independence signifies a rejection of this exploitative system. The Sahel Alliance, which includes these three nations, represents a unified stance against foreign interference and a commitment to forge partnerships on their own terms. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso are taking bold steps to establish local institutions like national banks and launch national bonds to attract investment directly. By doing so, they are asserting their intention to replace foreign loans and foreign aid with local financial instruments and policies that prioritize regional interests. Additionally, these countries are pushing for control over their abundant natural resources. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are rich in valuable minerals such as gold and uranium, resources that have long been controlled by foreign corporations with French ties. France, in particular, has benefited from uranium exports from Niger to power its own nuclear industry, while Niger itself sees limited benefit. The Sahel Alliance nations are now asserting more control over these resources, reinvesting profits locally, and challenging foreign ownership in key industries. This push toward resource nationalism is a central pillar in their strategy to break free from the exploitative economic relationships of the past. The impact of this movement could be far-reaching. By asserting economic sovereignty, rejecting foreign aid with strings attached, and dismantling exploitative structures like the CFA franc, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are positioning themselves as leaders in a new wave of African autonomy. Their actions signal to the world that African nations are prepared to challenge the financial frameworks that have kept them dependent and impoverished. While challenges remain, particularly in terms of maintaining stability without Western aid, these countries are reshaping the narrative of African economic independence. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, at EAS, spearheaded by Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso alongside leaders from Mali and Niger, marks a pivotal moment in the drive for regional autonomy and resistance against neo-colonial influence. The AES, launched in 2023, is an alliance committed to breaking free from exploitative economic and political practices imposed by former colonial powers, notably France. This bold coalition seeks not only to enhance regional security and stabilize governance across the Sahel, but also to secure economic independence, resist foreign influence, and control valuable resources. The alliance sends a powerful message that these nations will pursue their own path forward, economically, militarily, and politically. One of the AES's main objectives has been to diminish reliance on Western aid and foreign loans, which have often come with restrictive conditions favoring foreign investors over local populations. For decades, France and Western institutions have wielded economic power in the region through the CFA franc, foreign aid, and debt. This dynamic has long limited these countries' economic freedom, ensuring their economies serve external interests. The AES, however, seeks to change this dependency structure entirely by creating an economically sovereign bloc that is accountable to its own people, not foreign powers. Under Traoré's leadership, the AES is actively working to establish financial independence within its member states. Traoré, for instance, has introduced financial reforms in Burkina Faso, including the establishment of national banking systems like the National Treasury Bank and the Post Bank, aimed at reducing dependency on foreign-controlled financial networks. AES leaders are also exploring alternatives to the CFA franc, looking for ways to establish a currency that is free from French oversight and truly reflective of the Sahel's economic realities. These steps are foundational in building an alliance that can operate outside the constraints of Western financial institutions and prioritize local economies. The AES is not only addressing economic independence, but also the strategic control of natural resources. Together, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are rich in high-value commodities like gold and uranium. Historically, these resources have been dominated by foreign companies, particularly French corporations, which have reaped the benefits while contributing little to local development. Uranium from Niger, for example, has fueled France's nuclear energy sector, providing substantial energy security to France, while Niger itself remains one of the world's poorest countries. The AES is challenging this status quo by pushing for resource nationalism and ensuring that the profits from these valuable resources stay within the region. This shift allows AES members to fund their own development projects, bolster local industries, and reduce the need for foreign aid or loans. The formation of AES also marks a shift in military and security policy. Recognizing that security is intrinsically linked to sovereignty, the AES leaders are collaborating on joint military initiatives to secure their borders and combat extremist threats. By taking security matters into their own hands, the alliance members aim to reduce the presence of foreign military forces that have operated in the Sahel under the guise of counterterrorism, but often pursued their own agendas. France's military presence in the region, for example, has been heavily criticized, with many locals seeing it as a continuation of colonial control rather than genuine support. The AES's security efforts symbolize a commitment to self-reliance in defense, reinforcing the message that these nations are capable of handling their own security needs without foreign intervention. As a collective, the AES is also exploring alternative alliances with global powers that are not bound by colonial legacies in the region. The alliance has signaled interest in partnerships with countries like Russia and China, which are positioning themselves as potential investors and allies without the stringent conditions that Western aid traditionally imposes. This pivot could offer AES nations more equitable partnerships, but they are proceeding with caution to avoid falling into a new form of dependency. The goal remains clear: to create relationships that are based on mutual respect, economic fairness, and strategic interests rather than neo-colonial dominance. Ibrahim Traoré and his AES counterparts have sparked a new wave of pride and empowerment across the Sahel, inspiring local populations to rally behind the vision of a self-reliant and resilient region. The creation of the AES demonstrates a bold commitment to reshaping not only the economies of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, but also their place on the global stage. It signals a new chapter where the Sahel states are stepping up to determine their own futures, controlling their resources, securing their territories, and managing their finances in ways that reflect the will of their people rather than the interests of foreign powers. Through the AES, Traoré and other Sahel leaders are laying the groundwork for a future where African nations can break free from the shackles of debt and dependency, uniting instead in a shared vision of prosperity, autonomy, and true economic freedom. This alliance represents a beacon of hope for the continent, highlighting that African nations can redefine their place in the world and build a self-sufficient and prosperous future on their own terms. Mali's recent debt clearance is a powerful step forward, not just for the nation itself, but as a beacon for the entire continent. It challenges the entrenched neo-colonial model imposed by the West and opens the door for other African countries to consider alternative paths towards self-reliance. The question remains: can other African nations follow Mali's lead and dismantle the structures of dependency? If so, the vision of a financially autonomous Africa, free from foreign exploitation, may finally become a reality. Still, Mali's road to sustainable debt freedom is not without challenges. Can Mali maintain this debt-free status in a world with intense economic pressures? Moving away from traditional partners could leave Mali vulnerable to economic isolation, which may threaten these new gains. Without effective governance and distribution of wealth, there's a risk that these achievements may not trickle down to all Malians. Critics argue that while Mali's debt payoff is a symbolic move, it remains to be seen if this economic shift will lead to sustainable change. Yet, Mali's actions inspire hope. If more African countries take similar steps toward financial independence, Africa could see a restructuring of power dynamics on the continent. Imagine a future where African nations negotiate as equals on the global stage, making decisions that reflect the best interests of their people. The success of Mali's economic strategy could indeed catalyze a movement across Africa, challenging decades of economic dependency. Assimi Goita's government is sending a clear message to African nations and the world. It is possible for Africa to own its future and to break free from external economic constraints. The journey to financial freedom is long and filled with complexities, but Mali has taken a powerful first step that echoes across the continent. Could this landmark decision by Mali inspire a new wave of financial autonomy across Africa, or are the hurdles too substantial to overcome? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.